Ever wonder why some brands command cult-like loyalty while others have to fight for every single sale? It's not about the features or the price. It's about something much deeper. Today we're breaking down the 10 life-changing lessons from Start With Why by Simon Sinek. We try to fix it with the usual carrots and sticks, dropping our prices, running flashy promotions, or using fear just to get a quick yes. But those tactics never build real trust or loyalty. It's exhausting because we're fixated on what we do, while completely forgetting the one thing that actually moves people's hearts. Simon Sinek's Start With Why reveals the profound truth that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. If you're ready to stop manipulating and start inspiring, you need to hear how the world's greatest leaders actually think and communicate from the inside out.
And that really is the core of it, isn't it?
Exactly. And, that's our mission for you today. You, listening right now, you're here because you want to understand the actual, the real mechanics of motivation.
Right, because it applies to everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
Like whether you're leading some massive corporation or managing a tiny creative team, or honestly, if you're just trying to figure out your own personal path, why you feel stuck in your career, we're going to fundamentally shift how you view leadership and communication and just human connection in general. So we've got our resident expert here in the studio to help us unpack all these ideas, pull them apart, and see how they actually work in the real world. Welcome to the deep dive.
Hey, thanks. It's fantastic to be here. And I really want to set the stage right away, for you listening, before we even jump into the concepts.
Yeah, lay it out for us.
What we're exploring today is not, I repeat, it is not just another flavor of the month business strategy.
Right, like some buzzword bingo.
Exactly. It's not some clever marketing gimmick cooked up in a boardroom to trick people into buying more stuff.
Right.
What's actually fascinating here is that we are looking at a naturally occurring pattern.
Like rooted in biology, right?
Yeah, completely rooted in human biology and anthropology. I mean, it dictates how we behave as a species, how we form our communities, and ultimately, why we choose to follow certain people or brands while just completely ignoring others.
Which means it applies to absolutely everyone.
Everyone, every industry.
So to understand how we fix our communication, we kind of have to start at the foundational geometry of it all. So let's jump in. Lesson 1, the golden circle.
Yeah, the golden circle.
Let's start right at the bedrock here. We are talking about this concept, and it's directly compared to something mathematical, right? Like the golden ratio.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the biology and the math sort of intersect beautifully. So the golden ratio is this mathematical formula that offers evidence of order in the seeming disorder of nature.
Like leaves on a tree or something.
Right. If you know what to look for, you see it everywhere. It dictates the perfect symmetry of leaves, the spiral of a nautilus shell, the geometric perfection of snowflakes.
Even human faces, I think.
Yes, the proportions of the human face. It basically proves that predictability and structure exist where we might otherwise just assume things are totally random.
Okay, so how does that connect to human behavior?
Well, the golden circle does the exact same thing, but it maps out human motivation. It finds order and predictability in why we do what we do.
Interesting.
So visually, I want you to imagine a target, just a simple bullseye.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It consists of 3 concentric rings. The outermost, the largest ring, is what? The middle ring is HOW. And the center, the smallest ring, the bullseye itself, is WHY.
Okay, let's unpack this visually and conceptually.
Yeah.
We need to define these terms really clearly. So you, listening right now, have a rock-solid picture in your head.
Good idea.
So from the outside in, the what is pretty straightforward. I mean, I assume everyone knows what they do.
Oh, very straightforward. And yes, absolutely, everyone knows this. Every single organization on the planet and every individual knows what they do.
Right.
If you run a company, these are the tangible products you sell or the services you offer. If you're an employee, it's your job function. It's the tangible, easily identifiable stuff.
Like an accountant does taxes, a car company makes cars.
Exactly. But then, moving one ring inward, we get to the HOW. Now, this gets a little more exclusive.
Because not everyone knows how they do it.
Right. Some companies and some people know how they do what they do. You might call it in business jargon, a differentiating value proposition or a proprietary process.
Your secret sauce.
Exactly. It's the thing that purportedly makes you better or different than the competition, your unique methodology, or maybe your commitment to high-quality materials.
I always think of like a local coffee shop.
Oh, perfect example.
The what is easy, right? They sell coffee.
Yeah.
But the HOW is maybe that they only source fair trade beans, or they use a specific pour-over method that takes exactly 3 minutes.
Or they train their baristas to remember every regular's name.
Yeah, that's how they do it differently than the giant mega chain down the street.
Yeah. Exactly. But then we hit the bullseye, the WHY, and we have to be extremely clear here, because the biggest misconception, hands down, is that the WHY is about profit.
Right. Making money is not a WHY, is it?
Precisely. Making money is a result.
It's just the output.
It is the byproduct of doing the what and the how effectively. When we talk about the WHY, we are asking a much deeper, almost philosophical question.
Like what?
Like, what is your purpose? What is your cause or your fundamental belief? Why does your organization even exist beyond making a profit?
Why do you personally get out of bed every morning?
Yes. And frankly, why should anyone else in the world care about what you were doing?
That's the heavy hitter right there.
It really is. And the critical insight here is about the direction of our communication.
Because most companies get this totally backward.
Completely backward. Most companies and individuals communicate from the outside in. They start with the clearest, most tangible thing, what they do, and they try to move toward the fuzziest, most abstract thing, WHY they do it.
They say, here is our product. Here are all the amazing features. Here is how it's better than the competition. Do you want to buy it?
Right.
It's entirely backward compared to how the greatest, most inspiring leaders operate.
Yeah, the truly inspiring leaders and organizations completely reverse that flow. They communicate from the inside out. They start with the WHY.
Can we look at Apple for a second? Because they're kind of the gold standard for this.
They are the quintessential example of this reversal. If Apple communicated from the outside in, like everyone else in the computer industry does, their marketing would sound something like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one?
Which is just so incredibly uninspiring.
It's boring.
It's factually true, but it does absolutely nothing to my heart rate. Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy.
Go for it.
It's like meeting someone at a party. Imagine you are standing by the snack table, and someone walks up to you, shakes your hand, and immediately just lists their job title and their salary. Their what?
Hi, I'm Bob. I sell paper.
Right? Hi, I'm an accountant. I use advanced Excel macros, and I make $80,000 a year. You are instantly bored to tears. You're looking over their shoulder for an excuse to go get another drink.
Oh, I think I hear my friend calling me.
Exactly. But if that same person walks up to you and tells you what gets them out of bed in the morning, their passion, their cause, their WHY, suddenly you're hooked.
Even if they're still an accountant.
Even if they are an accountant. If they say, I believe that small businesses are the lifeblood of this city, and I love helping local bakers and mechanics thrive by taking the stress of finances off their plate, you want to know more. It changes the entire dynamic.
It really does.
So how does Apple actually communicate that makes them so different?
So Apple communicates from the inside out. They start at the bullseye. Their actual message, the core of their entire brand identity, sounds more like this. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one?
It feels completely different.
It's a totally different vibe.
It's almost a physical sensation, the shift in tone.
Yeah.
But I have to push back a little here because I know some listeners are thinking, this just sounds like a clever copywriting trick.
I hear that a lot.
Is this simple reversal of information order really enough to change human behavior? Like, is just switching the order of the sentences in a TV commercial going to build a billion-dollar empire?
It's a fair question, but it's not just a linguistic trick. It is a fundamental reorientation of value. By starting with WHY, you are establishing a belief system right out of the gate.
So the product becomes secondary.
In a way, yes. The whats, the actual products you are selling, no longer serve as the primary reason for the consumer to buy. Instead, they become the tangible proof of that shared belief.
Oh, proof of the belief. I like that.
When people buy a Macintosh computer or an iPhone, they aren't just buying a machine to calculate spreadsheets or make phone calls.
They are buying a piece of that rebellion.
Exactly. They are buying a physical manifestation of the idea of challenging the status quo. This subtle shift in the order of communication profoundly alters consumer perception. It changes the product from a commodity into a symbol.
And this shift in perception leads us directly to the core mantra of this entire deep dive. Lesson 2. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
That's the one.
This single phrase is the key that unlocks everything we were talking about today.
It is the ultimate takeaway. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The whats are merely the tangible proof of the WHY.
So how do we see this play out in the real world?
To truly understand the gravity and the power of this concept, we have to look at what happens when companies try to cross over into entirely different industries.
Okay, yeah.
Let's stick with Apple for a moment. They don't just sell computers anymore. They sell cell phones, they sell digital music players, they sell tablets, watches.
They even produce television shows now.
Right, they have a streaming service, and consumers accept this perfectly. No one questions it. But contrast that with Apple's competitors who tried the exact same strategy. Look at Dell or Gateway.
Oh, man. I remember this perfectly. In the early 2000s, Dell tried to sell MP3 players.
Yes, they did.
And Gateway tried to sell flat-screen televisions, and it was a complete disaster. But why? Because functionally, those companies had massive manufacturing power.
Oh, absolutely. Dell makes phenomenally great quality products. They have brilliant engineers, flawless supply chain. But Dell defined themselves by what they did.
They made computers.
Right. Their entire identity was wrapped up in being a purveyor of affordable, highly customized beige boxes for your desk. So when they released an MP3 player, consumers looked at it and their brains just sort of short-circuited.
They're like, why would I buy a music player from the spreadsheet machine company?
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. The consumer fundamentally rejected it because it didn't align with the what that Dell was known for. Gateway had the exact same problem with their flat-screen TVs.
Because they lacked a clear WHY.
Because they lacked a clear communicated WHY, they were permanently trapped inside their what. Apple, however, defined itself by its WHY challenging the status quo, thinking differently.
So it doesn't matter what they build.
Exactly. Whether Apple releases a desktop computer, a mobile phone, a wristwatch, or a digital payment system, as long as that product challenges the status quo and is beautifully designed, the consumer accepts it as entirely authentic. The industry doesn't matter. The belief matters.
That is wild to think about. It explains so many product failures that seemed like absolute slam dunks on paper in the boardroom.
Boardrooms love a logical expansion.
Let's talk about one of the most tragic examples of this, TiVo. Because TiVo was a technological marvel that fundamentally misunderstood human psychology, turning a living room revolution into a cautionary tale.
Oh, TiVo is the perfect tragic example of ignoring the WHY. Let's go back to the late 1990s and early 2000s.
The dark ages of television.
Truly, TiVo had a genuinely revolutionary product. It was arguably the single highest quality product in its category. But when they launched it to the world, how did they market it?
I'm guessing from the outside in.
Purely from the outside in. They marketed the what? They went on television and said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live television, and memorizes your viewing habits without you having to do anything.
Which, to a mass-market consumer in 1999 who was still struggling to program a blinking 12.0 on their VCR.
It sounded like witchcraft.
Or a surveillance device, like, it's memorizing my habits.
Exactly. It terrified the technophobic mass public. They didn't understand the mechanics of it, and because TiVo only gave them the mechanics, they rejected it.
And the stock tanked, right.
The stock debuted around $40, spiked briefly because of the hype, and then plummeted, languishing below $10 for years. They had the absolute best technology, but they communicated from the outside in.
So what should they have done?
If TiVo had started with their WHY, the message would have been completely different, and it would have resonated on an emotional level. Imagine if they had said, if you are the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, if you are tired of networks telling you when you have to sit on your couch, boy, do we have a product for you.
It pauses live TV, skips commercials.
Yes. The what becomes the proof of the WHY. It changes from a scary technical manual into an empowering tool for freedom.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially when we look at direct competitors. Think about the MP3 player wars. You had the iPod versus the Creative Zen.
Oh, classic matchup.
Now, Creative Technology was arguably much more qualified to build a digital music player. They had a long history in digital audios, sound cards, all the technical expertise. But they marketed their product as a 5GB MP3 player.
Pure what?
That is a pure, unadulterated what? It's a technical specification. Then Apple comes along and markets the iPod as 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Pure empathy.
That's the WHY. It's not about gigabytes. It's about freedom, mobility, and having your entire music collection with you wherever you go. But let me challenge this for a second.
Okay, challenge away.
Say I'm a pragmatist. Functionally, a PC is often cheaper and highly effective. A lot of generic MP3 players work just fine. If the what doesn't matter, can a company just have a great, inspiring WHY and a terrible product? Can you sell absolute garbage just because your WHY is beautifully articulated?
No, absolutely not. And we have to be really careful to clarify this. A company cannot survive with a great WHY and a terrible product. The product has to function well.
Right. If it breaks in 2 days, no one cares about your belief.
Exactly. If the iPod's battery died every 10 minutes, no amount of inspiring marketing would have saved it. But the crucial point here is that the product's quality is merely the cost of entry into the market.
Oh, it's just the baseline.
It's the baseline. It is not the primary driver of the consumer's decision. Better quality or more features alone do not inspire deep loyalty. They might drive a single transaction. Someone might buy the cheaper PC once, but they won't build a cult-like following where people camp outside a store for 3 days just to buy it first.
The what matters deeply as the tangible proof of your belief.
But the WHY is the emotional engine that drives the actual decision.
So to really grasp why we prioritize this emotional abstract connection over cold, hard logic, we actually have to look at the anatomy of the human brain. Lesson 3, biology of decision. This is where the business strategy actually becomes a science lesson, and for me, this was the biggest aha moment of the whole concept.
And this is where it stops being just an opinion or a neat marketing theory and becomes hard biological fact.
Walk us through the brain.
If you were to look at a cross-section of the human brain from the top down, it maps almost perfectly onto the golden circle. It's uncanny.
Really?
Yes. The newest area of the brain, evolutionarily speaking, is our Homo sapien brain called the neocortex. The neocortex corresponds precisely to the what level of the circle.
So it's the outer ring?
Exactly. It is responsible for all of our rational thought, our analytical thinking, our ability to understand complex data, and crucially, it is responsible for language.
Okay, so that's the logical speaking part of us. What about the inside?
The middle two sections of the brain make up what is called the limbic brain. The limbic brain corresponds to the HW and the WHY of the golden circle.
The bullseye.
The bullseye. This older part of the brain is responsible for all of our human feelings like trust, loyalty, love, and fear. It is also responsible for all human behavior and all of our decision-making.
Yeah, all decision-making.
All of it. But here is the critical catch, the biological quirk that changes everything. The limbic brain has no capacity for language whatsoever.
No capacity for language.
Yeah.
That is the missing link. That is exactly why we struggle so much to put our deepest feelings into words.
Exactly. This language disconnect explains so much of the human experience. It explains why we rely on gut decisions.
Because our gut isn't actually talking to us.
Right. Your gut doesn't actually make decisions. Your digestive tract isn't calculating risk. Your limbic brain is making the decision. But because your limbic brain literally cannot speak to you, you just feel a physical sensation that something is right or wrong.
It's why if you ask someone why they love their spouse, they really struggle to give you an accurate answer.
They'll start listing features.
Right. They'll say, well, she's smart, she's funny, she's kind to animals. But there are millions of smart, funny, kind people in the world. You don't love all of them.
Exactly. Those rational traits aren't the real reason you fell in love, but because the part of the brain that controls love, the limbic system, doesn't control language, we are forced to use our neocortex to invent rationalizations for decisions that were already made emotionally.
Which absolutely ruins the entire concept of traditional market research.
It destroys it.
If you put 10 people in a room for a focus group and ask them what they want in a product, their limbic brain knows exactly what it wants emotionally,
Right.
but they can't say it. So their neocortex kicks in, panics, and has to spit out a rational-sounding answer so they don't look stupid in front of the researchers.
Precisely. There is a fantastic example of this involving laundry detergent.
Oh, tell me about this one.
For years, massive consumer goods companies ran focus groups asking people what they wanted from their detergent. And the consumers, using their neocortex, gave the most logical answer possible. They said they wanted whiter whites and brighter brights.
I mean, it makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect logical sense. So these companies spent millions of dollars in R&D inventing new protein enzymes and color enhancers to make clothes objectively scientifically cleaner.
Okay, but did it work?
Well, years later, some brilliant anthropologists decided to actually study how people do laundry in their homes, and they noticed something fascinating. When people pulled their clothes out of the dryer, they didn't hold them up to the light to measure the luminescent brightness of the fabric. What was the very first thing they did?
They buried their face in the towels and smelled them.
They smelled them. They didn't actually care about the scientific metric of cleanliness. They just wanted the smell of clean. Feeling clean emotionally was vastly more important than being clean logically.
But they couldn't articulate that in a sterile focus group setting.
Right. It perfectly echoes Henry Ford's famous quote. If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. People can only ask for what they can rationalize, the what, but their actual behavior is driven by what they feel, the WHY.
This also explains our deep, primal need to belong to tribes. I love that we can connect this high-level neuroscience to a children's book. Let's talk about Dr. Seuss and the Sneetches.
Yes, the Sneetches. It's a perfect anthropological study wrapped in a kid's book.
I haven't read that in years. Remind us how it goes.
So, you have the Sneetches with stars on their bellies and the ones without. As human beings, we biologically desire to belong to groups that share our beliefs. It is a deeply ingrained survival mechanism.
Because if you were alone on the savannah,
Hundreds of thousands of years ago, if you were wandering the savannah alone, you died. When we surround ourselves with people who believe what we believe, trust emerges and we feel safe.
so how does that translate to today?
In the modern world, products and brands have simply become the stars on our bellies. They have become the tangible symbols of our internal identity.
Like the Mac user in the coffee shop.
Exactly. Think about a diehard Mac user opening their glowing aluminum laptop in a crowded, dimly lit coffee shop. They aren't just booting up a machine to type a document. They are signaling to the entire room who they are. They are displaying their star. They are saying, I am a creative. I challenge the status quo. I am one of you.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, in your day-to-day life? If we can't even trust our own words to explain our own feelings, how can we ever trust the data we are looking at?
It's tricky.
It reminds me of taking a massive multiple-choice test in high school. You read a question, and your gut instinct immediately points to C. It just feels right. But then you sit there, you let your neocortex kick in, you overthink it, you analyze all the other options, you start second-guessing yourself, and you erase C and change your answer to B.
And what happens?
You get it wrong.
You get it wrong every time.
That's exactly it. When you force people to make decisions using only the rational, analytical part of their brain, they end up overthinking. And those decisions are almost always of lower quality and take significantly longer to make.
So the gut is better. Gut decisions, driven by the limbic brain's rapid pattern recognition, tend to be faster and of much higher quality when it comes to human behavior. Now, data is incredibly important. Data is vital for the what, for providing the tangible proof that your product works. But the data shouldn't be the primary driver of the core decision. The feeling has to come first.
But appealing to the limbic brain is incredibly difficult because it requires genuine, authentic belief, and it takes time to build that trust.
It takes a lot of time.
And because it's so hard and because Wall Street demands results tomorrow, most organizations take the easy way out. They rely on a different, much more stressful, and ultimately toxic tactic to drive behavior. Lesson 4. Manipulation versus inspiration. There are really only two ways to influence human behavior, right?
Yes, when you boil it all down, you only have two options. You can either inspire behavior, which takes time and authenticity, or you can manipulate it, which is fast and easy.
And manipulation sounds like a bad word, but is it always?
We need to be clear here. Manipulation isn't necessarily a pejorative, evil term in this context. It is simply a standard, ubiquitous business practice. It's the age-old system of carrots and sticks that we experience every single day.
So let's look at the actual toolbox of manipulation, because these are everywhere, and once you see them, you can't unsee them.
Let's do it.
The most obvious one, the one that every consumer is intimately familiar with, is the price drop, the endless cycle of sales. And sure, it works. I've definitely bought things I didn't need just because they were half off, but it feels like a race to the bottom.
It is a literal race to the bottom. Dropping your price is highly effective. It drives transactions instantly. If you cut the price of a television by 50%, people will trample each other to buy it.
Black Friday style.
Exactly. But it is a dangerous, addictive game because it destroys your profit margins. And worse, it creates a conditioned, disloyal customer. You train them to only buy from you when you are the cheapest. The second your competitor drops their price by $1, that customer is gone. It builds zero loyalty.
Then we have promotions, the buy one, get one free deals, or my personal nemesis, the mail-in rebate. I cannot tell you how many times I've bought a piece of electronics because of a $50 mail-in rebate, And then the paperwork just sat on my desk until it expired.
Yeah.
It feels like a scam.
It feels like a scam because the psychology behind it is inherently adversarial. Mail-in rebates are a classic calculated manipulation. Manufacturers actually rely on industry terms called slippage and breakage.
Wait, they have a name for it.
Oh, yeah. They intentionally design the rebate process to be just cumbersome enough, requiring original barcodes, specific postmarks, complex forms, that they know a statistically large percentage of people will either forget to send it in, lose the receipt, or fill it out incorrectly.
Wow, that is insidious.
They are literally banking on the customer's failure to claim the money. It works to drive the initial sale because the customer's neocortex calculates the discount, but it certainly doesn't inspire long-term trust in the brand.
And then there's fear. This one is incredibly powerful because it hits right at our survival instincts.
Very powerful. This is the amygdala hijack. Think of the classic anti-drug commercials. This is your brain on drugs with the frying egg.
Classic.
Or life insurance companies selling you a policy with images of grieving widows, urging you to buy before it's too late. Or politicians telling you that if you vote for the other guy, your entire way of life will be destroyed.
That's everywhere right now.
Fear is a deeply biological motivator. It forces us to move away from something terrible. It triggers our fight or flight response. But again, it's a manipulation. It doesn't make you love the life insurance company. It just makes you terrified of dying uninsured.
What about aspirations? This feels a little more positive, a little more upbeat. 6 easy steps to losing weight, or how to become a millionaire in 30 days. We see this all over social media.
Aspirational messages tempt us towards something highly desirable. They offer a shortcut to a dream, but they are essentially the flip side of fear.
How so?
They are most effective on people who lack discipline or have deep, unaddressed insecurities. You can easily sell a January gym membership with an aspirational manipulation showing a picture of a fitness model, but you cannot inspire someone to actually wake up at 5 a.m. and go to that gym 3 days a week in February with a manipulation. It targets their insecurity, their desire for a quick fix, not their actual commitment to health.
Makes sense. Peer pressure is another massive one. 4 out of 5 dentists prefer Trident. Or the classic celebrity endorsement.
Peer pressure works brilliantly because, going back to our evolutionary biology, we fear we might be wrong or cast out if we go against the majority. We assume the majority must know something we don't.
And celebrity endorsements.
They play on this too. Think about Sam Waterston, the actor who famously played the righteous prosecutor on Law & Order, selling TD Ameritrade Financial Services.
I remember those.
What does an actor who memorizes scripts about the legal system have to do with the complex world of online stock trading? Absolutely nothing. But the brand uses his highly recognizable, trustworthy face to subconsciously pressure you into trusting their platform. Your limbic system says, I trust that guy from TV, therefore I trust this bank.
And finally, novelty. Disguising tiny incremental changes as massive innovation.
Think of the toothpaste aisle. You walk in, and a single brand like Colgate has 32 different types of toothpaste. Tartar control, whitening, baking soda, gel, paste, sparkle.
It's completely overwhelming.
It's so overwhelming and confusing that they actually had to put a selection guide on their website to help you choose. Adding a new flavor or a new colored stripe into the paste isn't true innovation. It's just a novelty designed to catch your eye and spur a quick purchase. It creates massive decision fatigue.
So the aggregate cost of all these manipulations is massive. The reality is, they absolutely work, which is why every company uses them. But they only drive individual transactions. They create repeat business, sure, but they do not create loyalty. And relying on them creates systemic stress.
A ton of stress.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's ground this in reality. If I am a small business owner, and it is Wednesday, and I am desperately struggling to make payroll by this Friday, a 50% off flash sale, a pure, unadulterated manipulation is going to generate the cash I need to save my business and feed my employees. Inspiration doesn't pay the rent this week. How can you tell me not to manipulate?
I wouldn't tell you not to. And to be fair, neither does the philosophy we're discussing. Manipulations are highly effective and absolutely necessary for short-term survival.
Okay, so it's not a complete ban on sales.
No. If you need cash by Friday to save your livelihood, drop the price. Run the promotion. The danger is not in using them. The danger is the addiction.
The addiction to the quick fix.
Exactly. When organizations rely only on manipulation day after day, year after year, they enter a brutal cycle of diminishing returns. It's like a drug. Over time, it costs more and more money to offer deeper discounts or flashier promotions just to get the same hit of revenue.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
It stresses the buyer with too many confusing choices, and it massively stresses the seller with razor-thin margins. Look at the American auto industry, specifically General Motors, leading up to the 2008 crash. For decades, they relied almost exclusively on heavy cash rebates, 0% financing, and massive price cuts to move metal off the lot.
Short-term decision after short-term decision.
To hit quarterly numbers. Eventually, that house of cards collapses because there is no underlying foundation of brand loyalty to sustain the company when the promotions stop.
So how do we avoid the manipulation trap? How do we break the addiction? We have to ensure our actions, our products, and our messaging perfectly match our deeply held beliefs. We need a way to filter out the noise. That brings us to a brilliantly simple filtering mechanism. Lesson 5, the celery test. This is arguably the most practical, implementable tool we're going to discuss today.
I love this one. It is a fantastic, highly visual metaphor. I want you to imagine you're invited to an upscale dinner party.
Okay, I'm wearing a nice suit.
Very nice suit. It's filled with highly successful, wealthy, brilliant entrepreneurs, and you start mingling, asking for business advice. You walk up to one very successful person and ask what the secret is. They lean in and say, you know what you need to succeed? You need M&Ms. If you aren't leveraging M&Ms in your business model, you are leaving millions of dollars on the table.
Okay, so I take out my notebook and I write down M&Ms.
Right. You move to the next group. Another equally successful titan of industry says, no, forget candy. It's all about rice milk. The demographic data shows that rice milk is the future of the market. You write that down.
Rice milk, checking that off.
Someone else pulls you aside and whispers, Oreos. We made an absolute fortune pivoting to Oreos. And finally, someone else emphatically tells you, celery. You have to get into the celery market before it's too late.
So if I'm a typical panicked business owner just trying to follow best practices, I go to the supermarket the next day and I buy M&Ms, rice milk, Oreos, and celery. I load up my cart with all of it.
Exactly. You buy them all because these smart people told you to and you desperately want to be successful. But look at the result. You spend a ton of money, you waste a ton of time wandering through wildly different aisles of the store.
And I just have a bunch of random stuff.
And most importantly, when you are standing in line at the checkout register and another customer looks over at your cart, what do they see? They see a chaotic, random assortment of junk food and health food. They have absolutely no idea what you stand for.
Are you throwing a kid's birthday party or are you going on a diet? Your cart is a confusing mess.
Exactly. But let's rewind and apply the WHY filter to this exact same scenario.
Okay, so what changes?
If you do the hard work of defining your WHY before you ever go to that dinner party, let's say your personal WHY is to always do things that are healthy and nourish the body, your experience of the world changes completely.
Because now I have a filter.
You go to the party, you hear the exact same brilliant advice from the exact same successful people. But this time, you filter every single piece of advice through your WHY. The M&Ms, they fail the test. The Oreos, they fail the test. You immediately ignore them.
And then at the store.
The next day, you could go to the supermarket and you confidently bypass the candy aisle. You only buy the celery and the rice milk.
It's so incredibly efficient. You save time, you save money, you don't get distracted by the shiny new trends, and most importantly, when you stand in line at the register holding only celery and rice milk, anyone looking at you knows instantly, without you saying a word, what you believe in.
Your what perfectly physically proves your WHY. It creates instant trust.
This applies to corporate strategy on a massive scale too, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. Let's look at the car market, specifically Volkswagen and Toyota. Volkswagen's name literally translates from German to people's car.
Right, the classic Beetle.
Their WHY, their historical reason for existing, was always about providing affordable, reliable, egalitarian transportation for the common person. But a few years ago, their executives got ambitious. They wanted to compete in the ultra-luxury market, so they introduced the VW Phaeton.
The Phaeton, I remember that car. It was huge.
A stunning V12-powered luxury sedan that cost upwards of $70,000.
Which is an absolute engineering marvel, but it completely failed the celery test.
It failed spectacularly. It was a great car, high quality, excellent engineering. The what was perfect, but it made absolutely no sense to the consumer's limbic brain. A $70,000 people's car is a fundamental contradiction.
It's an Oreo.
It was an Oreo in a cart full of celery. People rejected it because it violated the trust and the WHY that Volkswagen had spent decades building. On the other hand, look at Toyota.
How do they handle it?
Their WHY is also centered around efficiency, affordability, and mass market reliability. When Toyota decided they wanted to capture the high-margin luxury car market, they knew that a $70,000 luxury Toyota would instantly fail their celery tests. Consumers wouldn't buy a luxury car with a budget badge.
So what did they do?
They didn't force it. They created an entirely new brand with a new WHY, Lexus. Lexus was free to be pure luxury without the baggage of Toyota's affordability mantra.
It's all about total alignment. It's like a famous, beloved, strict vegetarian restaurant suddenly deciding to offer a 24-ounce prime ribeye steak on the menu just because wholesale beef prices are low and the profit margin is huge.
Oh, that would be a disaster.
Right. The steak might be objectively high quality, cooked by a master chef. But the moment they put that steak on the menu, they destroy their business. Their core vegetarian customers feel profoundly betrayed and stop coming, and the hardcore steak eaters aren't going to trust a bunch of vegans to cook their meat anyway. They alienate everyone to chase a quick buck.
That is the perfect analogy.
But let me ask you this, because mistakes happen. What if a company realizes they have accidentally bought the Oreos? What if they look at their product line and realize half of their services fail the celery test? How do they recover from that?
The first, most painful step is acknowledging the misalignment. You have to realize that the short-term revenue you are getting from those Oreos is actively damaging your long-term brand equity and eroding your trust.
You have to cut them.
Recovering means having the immense discipline to pull back. You have to stop offering products or services that violate your core belief, even if it hurts your bottom line in the short term. It requires going back to your founding purpose, stripping away the noise, and realigning your what with your WHY. It is painful, but it's the only way to rebuild trust.
But filtering your products on a shelf is only half the battle. That logic is totally useless if the people stocking those shelves, the people actually working for you, are a bunch of Oreos trying to sell celery. You have to filter the people executing the vision. Lesson 6. Hire those who believe what you believe. And to illustrate this, we look at one of the most insane, grueling survival stories in human history.
Yes, the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton's 1914 Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. Shackleton wanted to be the first person to cross the Antarctic continent on foot. It was an incredibly dangerous, almost suicidal mission.
So how do you hire for that?
Think about how you hire a crew for something like that. If he had hired based on typical modern corporate business practices, he would have looked for the people with the best nautical resumes, the most years of experience sailing in the ice, the most technical whats.
But he didn't do that at all.
He placed a shockingly blunt ad in the London Times, and the ad didn't ask for a single credential, it read. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success.
That is a brutal, terrifying job description. Who would apply for that?
Exactly. It was the perfect psychological filter. The only people who would read that ad and think, yes, sign me up, are people who are driven by the exact same burning, irrational desire for survival, adventure, and honor that Shackleton himself had.
He hired for the WHY.
He didn't hire for technical skill. He hired for pure belief and attitude. And the result of that hiring practice is legendary. His ship, the Endurance, became trapped in the pack ice. The ice crushed the ship into splinters. The crew was stranded on the frozen ocean for nearly 2 years in impossible, freezing, dark conditions.
It's a miracle they didn't kill each other.
By all accounts, they should have turned on each other. But there was no mutiny. There was no chaos. And miraculously, not a single member of that 27-man crew died. Their shared belief, their shared WHY, created an unbreakable bond of trust that guaranteed their survival where mere technical skills would have shattered.
That translates so perfectly from the frozen ice to the modern corporate world. Think about Southwest Airlines and their legendary founder Herb Kelleher's famous philosophy. You don't hire for skills, you hire for attitude. You can always teach skills.
And it was that exact philosophy that Gordon Bethune used to pull off one of the greatest corporate turnarounds in history with Continental Airlines.
What was going on there?
Before Bethune took over, Continental was run by a man named Frank Lorenzo. Lorenzo was the quintessential manipulator. He ruled his company entirely by fear, intimidation, and cost-cutting. The culture was so toxic, and the lack of trust was so profound that there is a famous, crazy detail about Lorenzo.
Oh, I've heard this, the soda can thing.
Yes. He was so distrustful of his own employees that he wouldn't even drink a soda on a continental flight unless he personally opened the can himself. He thought his employees might poison him.
If the CEO is terrified that the flight attendants are going to poison him, the employees certainly aren't going to trust the CEO or each other or the customers. The culture was completely broken.
Exactly. It was a miserable place to work and a miserable airline to fly. When Bethune took over as CEO, he didn't magically get $1 billion to buy new shiny airplanes or secure better, more profitable routes. He had the exact same metal tubes and the exact same employees.
But he changed the WHY.
He completely revolutionized the culture. He set out to give the employees something to believe in again. He created an environment where people felt trusted, where they felt they belonged to a team. He aggressively fired the executives who wouldn't be team players no matter how highly skilled their neocortex made them. He hired and retained people who believed in making Continental a great, dignified place to work. And simply by changing the WHY, he turned the worst airline in the industry into the absolute best.
To really hammer home the emotional difference this makes to a worker, there is a beautiful classic parable about the stonemasons. Let's dig into the cathedral builders.
It's a story that perfectly captures the essence of fulfillment. Imagine you walk onto a medieval construction site. You walk up to a stonemason who is working in the blazing hot sun covered in dust, and you ask him, "Do you like your job?"
And what does he say?
He looks at you, wiping the sweat off his brow, looking miserable, and says, "I've been building this wall for as long as I can remember. The work is monotonous, the stones are heavy, I'm exhausted, and I can't wait to go home." He is working entirely for the what? He is trading his physical labor for a wage to build a wall.
But then you walk just 10 feet away to a second stonemason.
You ask the second stonemason the exact same question. He is doing the exact same grueling, heavy work. The sun is just as hot, but he looks up at you, his eyes are shining with pride, and he says, "I am building a magnificent cathedral."
Wow.
He is working for the WHY. He sees his exhausting, repetitive labor as a vital, indispensable contribution to a massive, glorious higher purpose. The physical work is identical, the pay might even be identical, but his internal fulfillment is entirely different. He is inspired.
I love that story. But I want to make this actionable for the listener right now. If you're a manager or a small business owner, how do you actually spot a cathedral builder when they are sitting across your desk? Because let's be honest, everyone fakes passion in an interview to get the job. They all read the same articles. They all say they are deeply passionate about data entry or highly motivated by spreadsheet optimization. How do you pierce through the polished resume and the rehearsed answers?
It's a great question, and it comes down to how you structure the conversation. If you start an interview by listing the job requirements, the candidate's neocortex will simply kick in, and they will tailor all of their answers to prove they have the specific skills you just asked for. They will tell you what you want to hear.
Because they're smart.
Right. But if you start the interview by talking about your company's WHY, if you sit down and talk about your pause, your belief, the ultimate impact you want to have on the world, and you stop talking and just watch their reaction, you will see the biological truth.
Like body language.
Exactly. Do their eyes light up? Do they physically lean in? Do they interrupt you to start sharing their own personal stories that align with your cause? You start by talking about the cathedral, not the heavy bricks. If they're just looking for a paycheck, their limbic system won't react. They will remain stoic and polite. But if they are a true believer, they will naturally physically reveal themselves.
But bringing all these believers together, assembling a room full of passionate cathedral builders, is essentially useless without a visionary to point them all in the right direction. And how does a leader actually unify all those believers? It requires a very specific type of presence. Lesson 7. Charisma comes from WHY. We need to make a really sharp distinction here between energy and charisma, because society often confuses the two.
It's a distinction most people completely miss. Energy is easy to copy. Energy is entirely external. You can have high energy simply because you got 8 hours of sleep, or you drank 3 cups of strong coffee, or you just naturally have a loud, exuberant, extroverted personality.
Energy gets people fired up.
Energy can certainly motivate people. It can get a crowd excited and jumping up and down for a brief period. But charisma is completely different. Charisma inspires. Charisma has nothing to do with volume. It comes directly from a crystal clear WHY. It is an absolute, unshakable internal conviction in an ideal that is much bigger than oneself.
Let's look at the tech world to illustrate this perfectly. Let's compare the leadership styles of 2 men who ran the same massive company, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer.
Think about Steve Ballmer when he was the CEO of Microsoft. He was famous, almost infamous, for his manic energy. He would literally run out onto the stage at corporate conferences, sweating profusely, screaming at the top of his lungs, pumping his fist, chanting, "Developers, developers, developers."
I've seen that video. It's wild.
He was a bouncing ball of pure kinetic energy, and the crowd would go absolutely wild. But when Ballmer left the stage, that energy quickly dissipated. It motivated the crowd in the moment, it got their adrenaline pumping, but it didn't inspire deep, lasting loyalty to a larger cause. It was just a great show.
Yeah, contrast that with the founder, Bill Gates.
Bill Gates is not an energetic speaker. He can be socially awkward, he speaks quietly, he often looks down, he certainly doesn't run around the stage sweating. But when Bill Gates speaks, people lean in and hang on his every single word.
They really do.
They take his ideas, write them down, and carry them for years. Gates has an undeniable magnetic charisma because he has an absolute clarity of WHY. He genuinely, deeply believes in using software and technology to empower people and solve massive global problems. His quiet conviction inspires people to act, whereas Ballmer's loud energy merely motivated them to cheer.
To visualize how this leadership structure actually works in a company, we need to take the golden circle and pull it into 3 dimensions. Instead of a flat target on a wall, imagine grabbing the bullseye and pulling it up toward you so it forms a 3D cone or a megaphone.
This megaphone model is crucial for understanding how successful organizations are actually structured. At the very top of the cone, the point is the leader. This person represents the WHY. They are the visionary. They are looking out at the horizon.
But they can't do it alone.
No, a leader cannot build the company alone. A vision without execution is just a hallucination. So, below the leader, in the wider middle section of the cone, are the HOW types. These are your senior executives, your brilliant operators, the people who know how to build the infrastructure, the supply chains, the systems, and the processes to bring the leader's vision into reality.
And the base.
Below them, at the wide base of the megaphone, the part that actually touches the market, are the what types. These are the thousands of employees who execute the day-to-day tasks and the actual physical products and services that go out into the world.
History is absolutely full of these essential partnerships between the visionary and the builder, the WHY type and the HOW.
Every great movement requires both. Martin Luther King Jr. was the visionary, the WHY. He gave the speeches that moved millions. But he had Ralph Abernathy, who was his HOW. Abernathy was the pragmatic organizer who actually mapped out the marches, managed the finances, dealt with the logistics, and made the movement function day to day.
And in business.
In business, Steve Jobs was the WHY of Apple, the brilliant, demanding visionary. But Steve Wozniak was the HOW, the quiet, genius engineer who actually sat at the workbench and built the physical machines that changed the world. Walt Disney was the dreamer who sketched the mouse, but his brother Roy Disney was the pragmatic financial wizard who built the corporate structure that made the theme parks possible. A WHY type without a HW type is just a starving artist whose brilliant ideas never see the light of day.
So let's bring this back to the listener. What does this all mean for us normal folks? I imagine a lot of listeners are sitting in their cars or at their desks right now thinking, well, I'm not a grand visionary. I don't have a sweeping manifesto to change the world. I just like doing my job well. Is it okay if the listener is a HOW type? Does everyone have to be a charismatic, visionary WHY guy to be successful in life?
It is absolutely okay, and in fact, it is statistically necessary. The vast majority of people are HOW types. And the reality is, HW types are the ones who actually build the billion-dollar businesses. They are the operators, the pragmatists, the ones who keep the lights on.
So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Completely. As we said, a WHY type will literally starve to death without HOW type to figure out how to monetize the vision and build the infrastructure. If you realize you are a HOW type, your goal isn't to force yourself to become a fake visionary that will just make you miserable. Your goal is to find a WHY type whose vision you genuinely believe in and partner with them to build their cathedral.
Once that charismatic leader speaks into the top of the megaphone and the HOW types build the systems, the message finally travels out the wide end into the marketplace. But it doesn't hit everyone at once. Who is actually listening? Who adopts this message first? Lesson 8, the law of diffusion. We have to look at how ideas spread through a population.
The law of diffusion of innovations is a well-established sociological model that explains how new ideas, new products, or new technologies spread through any given population. It is visualized as a standard bell curve, divided into 5 distinct segments based on psychological risk tolerance.
Break it down for us.
First, on the far left edge, you have the innovators, which make up roughly 2.5% of the population. These are the people who will try anything just because it's new. Next to them are the early adopters, making up about 13.5%. These two groups sit on the left side of the curve.
And then the big middle section.
Then you hit the massive, profitable middle, the early majority at 34% and the late majority at another 34%. Finally, trailing at the far right end are the laggards at 16%, the people who only buy a smartphone because they literally cannot find a rotary phone anymore.
But the crucial point here is that mass market success cannot be achieved until you hit a very specific tipping point on that curve.
Yes, you cannot achieve true sustainable mass market success until you penetrate between 15% and 18% of the market. You cannot skip the left side of the curve. You must first target the innovators and the early adopters.
Why them specifically?
Because these are the people who rely heavily on their intuition. They're the people who share your beliefs. They are the ones who will buy your rough, expensive, early version product, not just because it's functionally good, but to prove their own WHY to the outside world. They are the ones who will suffer immense inconvenience, who will wait in line outside a store in the freezing rain for 6 hours, and who will pay a massive premium just to be the first to have the star on their belly.
To illustrate how this tipping point works in real life, far beyond just selling gadgets, we can look at a massive historical event, the August 1963 March on Washington. And just to be clear for you listening, we are objectively reporting the historical and logistical facts as a pure demonstration of this sociological law, without taking any modern political sides. We are looking at the mechanics of a movement.
And the logistics of that day are truly staggering when you think about them. 250,000 people showed up in the nation's capital on the exact right day, at the exact right time. In 1963, there were no websites, there were no cell phones, there were no mass email blasts, there were no targeted Facebook ads or algorithmic feeds to organize people. How on earth did it happen?
Word of mouth.
Dr. King didn't just send out 250,000 paper invitations. He traveled the country tirelessly preaching his belief. He spoke relentlessly to the innovators and the early adopters, the people who already believed what he believed about equality. Those early adopters then took his message, made it their own, and used their own personal networks, their churches, their communities to spread the word to their friends.
But the most profound point here is why those 250,000 people were actually standing on the mall that day.
They didn't show up for Dr. King. They showed up for themselves. They suffered the inconvenience of traveling across the country on unair-conditioned buses because of their own deeply held belief in equality. Dr. King simply provided the words, the perfect articulation of the WHY that allowed them to understand and express their own internal feelings. He gave them the megaphone. When they stood on the mall in Washington, they were surrounded by 250,000 people who shared their exact beliefs. It was the ultimate physical demonstration of the law of diffusion, creating a society-altering movement.
But let me challenge the standard brutal logic of modern business here. If I look at that bell curve, the vast majority of the money, the 68%, is sitting right in the middle, in the early and late majority. Why is it considered a fatal mistake for a company to just market directly to that massive rich middle group? Why not just skip the weird 16% on the left and go straight for the big bucks?
Because of the inherent psychology of the majority. The early majority, and especially the late majority, are highly practical, pragmatic people. They are not risk takers. The defining psychological characteristic of the early majority is that they will not try something new until someone else has tried it first.
I want a guarantee.
They demand social proof. They need a recommendation from someone they trust. If you try to market your brand new, untested product directly to them, they will simply ignore you because they don't trust you yet. You have to win over the early adopters first, because the early adopters are the influential trendsetters who will eventually vouch for you and convince the cautious early majority that it is safe to open their wallets.
Getting past that 18% tipping point, getting the early majority on board, is what brings massive world-changing success. But ironically, that massive success is the very thing that can destroy the golden circle. Lesson 9. Success is the biggest challenge. This sounds like a good problem to have, but it's actually incredibly destructive. Let's look at the story about a gathering of ultra-successful people.
It's a very sobering story about the gathering of titans at the MIT Endicott House. Every year, 40 to 50 of the most incredibly successful, wealthy entrepreneurs gather there to share ideas. One year, a speaker stood up and asked the room, "How many of you have achieved your financial goals?" About 80% of these multimillionaires raised their hands.
Which is an incredible room to be in.
Yeah.
But then came the follow-up question that shifted the entire mood.
The speaker then asked, "How many of you actually feel successful?" And 80% of the hands went down. Think about the profound dissonance of that moment. Here is a room full of millionaires, people who have achieved the ultimate capitalist dream, who have more money than they can spend, and they feel empty. Why?
Because they lost their WH.
Because achievement and success are two entirely different things. Achievement is the what. It's the tangible, measurable milestones. Hitting a revenue target, buying a massive house, taking your company public. Success, however, is the WHY. It is a deeply internal feeling. It only happens when you are in active pursuit of your underlying purpose. You can absolutely achieve all of your whats, get rich, and completely lose your WHY in the process.
And there is a specific organizational phenomenon that causes this, a breaking point called the split.
The split is the dangerous moment when an organization grows so large, so successful, and so loud that the clarity of its original WHY goes fuzzy. When a company is small, the founder is physically in the room. Every single employee interacts with them daily, absorbs their passion, and understands the WHY implicitly through osmosis.
But then it gets big.
But as the company becomes wildly successful and grows to hundreds or thousands of employees, the founder becomes physically removed. They are in the C-suite, not on the factory floor. The megaphone gets massive. At that point, the pure metrics take over. The company starts obsessing over what they're doing, revenue, market share, quarterly stock prices, and forgets why they started doing it in the first place.
There's a famous business adage, what gets measured gets done. Usually we measure the what, we measure dollars and units. But there's a fascinating example of how you can actually measure the WHY to prevent the split. I want to talk about Christina Harbridge and her debt collection agency, because debt collection is one of the most ruthless industries on earth.
It is notoriously brutal. The standard metric in debt collection is simply dollars collected. And because that's what gets measured, that's what the collectors focus on entirely. It results in hostile, aggressive, threatening behavior toward debtors on the phone. But Christina Harbridge wanted to build a company based on a different WHY. She wanted to bring compassion to a dark industry.
So how did she measure compassion?
She did something radical. She fundamentally changed the metrics. She didn't pay bonuses to her employees based on the amount of money they collected. She paid bonuses based on how many thank you notes her callers wrote to the debtors after getting off the phone.
That sounds like a recipe for absolute immediate bankruptcy. Paying debt collectors to write thank you notes.
You would think so. But let's look at the psychological mechanism at play. By measuring compassion, her WHY, she forced her callers to treat the people on the other end of the phone with dignity and respect. When a debtor, who is used to being screamed at and threatened by other agencies, a pure fear manipulation, is suddenly treated with calm dignity, their limbic system calms down. The threat response vanishes.
And what happened?
And because they were treated with humanity, they actually wanted to resolve the debt. They found ways to pay her agency first. Her agency ended up collecting 300% more than the industry average. She survived the split by finding a tangible way to measure an intangible WHY.
But what happens if the founder isn't there to enforce that measurement? What happens when the visionary leaves? There is a morbid but highly effective thought experiment called the school bus test.
The school bus test asks a simple, vital question. If the visionary founder of an organization gets hit by a school bus tomorrow and dies, will the organization continue to thrive at the same pace and with the exact same culture? Will the WHY survive without the physical presence of the person who originated it?
Do most companies pass?
Most companies fail this test miserably. Look at Walmart. When Sam Walton was alive, he physically embodied the WHY of that company, serving the local community and looking out for the everyday working person. But after he died, the company went through a massive split. The executives who took over became obsessed with a relentless growth, ruthless margin cutting, driving out local competition, and they lost the trust of the very communities they were supposed to serve.
Apple went through the exact same terrifying split when Steve Jobs was ousted in the 1980s by John Sculley. Sculley was a brilliant executive, a phenomenal HOW type who knew how to maximize profits. But he didn't embody Apple's rebellious WHY.
He was a numbers guy.
Right. Without Jobs there to protect the vision, the company lost its soul. They started pumping out confusing beige boxes. They nearly went bankrupt, and they didn't recover until Jobs returned and restored the WHY. It's exactly like a band that gets famous for playing raw, authentic garage rock in a basement. They have a massive hit. Then they get signed to a major corporate label, they get handed a team of professional songwriters, and suddenly they're producing overproduced, soulless pop albums to hit sales targets. They achieve the what, fame, and money. But they lost the music. They lost their WHY. So how does a company avoid this fate? How do they protect their WHY when Wall Street only cares about next quarter's profits?
You have to have the courage to defy the metrics of others. Look at Costco's co-founder, Jim Sinek. He famously publicly defied Wall Street analysts who heavily criticized him for paying his retail employees too well and giving them great health benefits.
Because Wall Street wanted better margins.
Wall Street wanted him to cut wages to boost short-term profit margins. It's the standard playbook. But Sinek knew that taking care of his employees was central to his WHY. He understood the biological truth. Loyal, well-paid, stress-free employees treat customers vastly better, which builds deep, long-term customer loyalty that far outpaces short-term stock bumps. He absolutely refused to let the what dictate the WHY.
To survive that split, to have the courage to stand firm against Wall Street analysts or massive industry pressure, you have to fundamentally change how you view the concept of competition. Lesson 10. You are your only competition. We've reached the final lesson, and to bring all this abstract business theory down to a deeply human level, we have to look at the story of Ben Komen.
Ben Komen was a high school cross-country runner who had cerebral palsy. His physical condition meant that the simple act of running was incredibly difficult and painful for him. He would often slip, lose his balance, fall hard in the mud, and he would always finish his races long after every single other runner had crossed the finish line.
Which is inspiring just on its own.
It is, but the most profound part of Ben's story is the difference in how he raced compared to the elite athletes. When the top runners race, they're competing directly against each other. It's a zero-sum game. They're constantly looking over their shoulders, agonizing over the guy next to them, trying to edge them out. If one of those elite runners trips and falls, the others don't stop to help him up. They speed up to take advantage of his weakness and win the medal.
But when Ben ran,
he wasn't competing against the other runners at all. He knew he wouldn't beat them. He was competing entirely against himself. His only goal, his deeply personal WHY, was simply to finish the course, to be slightly better, slightly stronger than he was yesterday. And because he was competing against himself, driven by that clear WHY, an amazing biological and social phenomenon happened. When all those other elite runners finished their race, they didn't go home or hit the showers.
what did they do?
They came back out onto the course, they found Ben, they ran alongside him, they physically helped him up when he fell in the mud. They cheered him on, step by excruciating step, until he crossed the finish line.
It perfectly, beautifully illustrates the concept of the infinite game. When you compete against others, when you are obsessed with beating your competition's what, it's a zero-sum game. You want to destroy them, and consequently, no one wants to help you. It's a lonely, stressful existence. But when you compete against yourself, waking up every single day trying to be a better version of who you were yesterday, driven by a clear, authentic WHY, everyone wants to help you. Employees want to work for you, customers want to buy from you, and even your competitors respect you. You attract the very help you need to survive.
To find that internal compass, we use one final powerful analogy, the Battle of Agincourt and the mechanics of the English longbow. An arrow cannot be shot forward with any power unless it is first pulled backward. You don't invent a WHY by looking forward at market research or focus groups or staring at a whiteboard trying to come up with a clever slogan. You certainly don't invent a WHY by looking sideways at what your competitors are doing.
You discover it.
You discover your WHY by looking backward. You look deep into your own past, your own upbringing, the specific defining experiences that shaped your deepest beliefs and your worldview.
So if a listener is sitting at their desk right now feeling completely burned out, feeling like they've lost their WHY, feeling trapped in the endless grind of the what, how do they stop looking at their competitors and start finding their own arrow?
They have to stop asking the anxious neocortex question, what should I do right now to be successful? And start asking the deeper limbic question, why did I care about any of this in the first place? They need to strip away the vanity metrics, the quarterly goals, and the competitive analysis, and reconnect with the core emotional belief that originally inspired them to act. It is a process of archaeological discovery, not marketing invention. The WHY is already there, living inside you, buried under years of the what. You just have to have the quiet courage to pull the arrow back to find it.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We've covered the fundamental geometry of the golden circle, the biological reality of our decision-making, the exhausting dangers of manipulation, the critical importance of the law of diffusion, and the ultimate hidden challenge of surviving your own success.
It's been a lot to cover, but it changes everything.
It really does. As we wrap up this journey today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to take with you. Think about your own life, your own career, your own relationships. Are you a visionary WY person, full of incredible ideas, who is struggling and starving right now simply because you haven't humbled yourself enough to partner with a practical how person? Or are you a brilliant, highly capable how person who feels empty at the end of every day because you haven't found a why of why to build a cathedral for? Understanding your own biology isn't just about building a better business. It's about finding exactly where you belong in the world.
Thank you for watching. Please like us, share, subscribe, follow up in the next video.